The elevator lurched to a halt on the 47th floor, its cables groaning against the weight of silence. Noah Fletcher dragged his worn cloth across the towering glass windows, the city lights blurring into golden streaks below when the soft whisper of expensive fabric brushed behind him. He turned slowly. A woman materialized from the shadows near the polished steel doors, her silhouette sharp against the dim emergency lighting. Designer black suit hugged her trembling frame. Platinum blonde hair swept back in a flawless chignon. Her pale fingers clutched a pristine white envelope against her chest like a lifeline. The Cartier on her wrist caught fragments of light as she glanced at it obsessively. "Excuse me," her voice barely above a breath, fracturing at the edges. "Tomorrow I need a husband, just for one day." Noah's cleaning rag slipped from his fingers, landing soundlessly on the marble floor. She opened the envelope with surgical precision, revealing stacks of crisp hundreds. $50,000, she whispered into the suffocating air between them. One party, one performance, nothing more. Her desperate blue eyes never left his face as the silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Noah stared at the money spilling from the envelope like autumn leaves. The bills were so new they stuck together, edges sharp enough to cut. This woman had to be insane. Rich people didn't approach janitors in broken elevators with marriage proposals. They called lawyers, assistants, people who mattered. He bent down slowly, retrieving his cleaning rag from the cold marble. The fabric felt rough against his calloused palms, a stark reminder of who he was, who he would always be. "Ma'am, I think you have me confused with someone else." Noah's voice echoed in the confined space. The woman stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown timer. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the way her lipstick had been chewed off on one side. She smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. "My name is Katherine Morrison," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Kate, and you're Noah Fletcher, building maintenance supervisor, divorced. One daughter, 8 years old." The blood drained from Noah's face. How did she know Lucy's age? How did she know anything about him? Kate's smile was razor-thin, apologetic but determined. "I've seen you working here, every night for the past 6 months. You're always here when everyone else has gone home?" Her voice carried the weight of someone who understood loneliness. "That's why I chose you. You need the money, and I need someone real." "Real for what?" Noah's hand tightened around the cleaning cloth. Kate glanced at her watch again, a nervous habit that seemed carved into her DNA. "My father is Richard Morrison, Morrison Holdings. He's turning 70 on Monday, and he's invited every important person in Oregon to celebrate." She paused, swallowing hard. "Including my fiancé, except I don't have one." The confession hung between them like smoke. "I told him I was married 6 months ago. I lied." Noah had heard of Richard Morrison. Everyone in Oregon had. The man owned half the state's commercial real estate, including the building where Noah mopped floors and cleaned windows. "Why lie about something like that?" Kate's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Because he was going to force me to marry Charles Whitmore, old family friend. Business merger disguised as a wedding." Her knuckles went white around the envelope. "Have you ever felt trapped, Mr. Fletcher? Like the walls are closing in and there's no way out?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Noah thought of his tiny apartment, the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen table, the way Lucy's shoes had holes he couldn't afford to fix. Trapped wasn't a strong enough word. "What exactly would I have to do?" His voice came out smaller than intended. Kate's shoulders sagged with relief. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "Attend the party with me. Smile. Shake hands. Let people assume we're married. 3 hours. 4 at most." "And then?" Noah asked. Kate met his eyes directly, unflinching. "Then you go home $50,000 richer, and I figure out how to live with the consequences." The elevator shuddered, a mechanical sigh that seemed to echo their collective exhaustion. Noah thought about Lucy's excited face that morning, when she'd asked about dinosaur books, the way her smile faltered when he'd said, "Maybe next week." Again. "I need to think about it," Noah said finally. Kate nodded, reaching into her purse for a business card. Her handwriting was elegant, controlled. "My number. If you decide yes, meet me at Coffee Bean on Main Street tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. She pressed the card into his palm, her skin cold despite the warm building. "If you don't show up, I'll understand. But Noah—" She paused at the elevator buttons. "Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all." The next morning dawned grey and wet, typical Oregon weather that matched Noah's mood perfectly. He'd spent the night staring at Kate's business card, turning it over in his fingers until the edges were soft. Lucy had chattered through breakfast about her plans for the weekend, oblivious to the decision weighing on her father's shoulders. Margaret, their elderly neighbour, had agreed to watch Lucy for the day without asking questions. She was good that way. Coffee Bean buzzed with its usual Sunday morning crowd, families sharing newspapers and pancakes, couples holding hands over steaming mugs, everyone living the normal life Noah craved. He spotted Kate immediately, sitting in the back corner with 2 untouched coffees growing cold before her. She'd traded her business suit for jeans and a soft grey sweater. Without the armour of corporate attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. "You came," she said when he slid into the opposite chair. There was genuine surprise in her voice, as if she'd expected him to take the sensible path and forget her proposal entirely. Noah wrapped his hands around the coffee mug, letting the warmth seep into his perpetually cold fingers. "Tell me why you really need a fake husband." Kate's smile flickered like a candle in wind. "The truth? My father doesn't think I can take care of myself. He sees me as a liability that needs managing." "So you're rebelling by hiring a janitor to play dress-up?" The words came out harsher than Noah intended, but Kate didn't flinch. "I'm not rebelling. I'm surviving." She pulled a small velvet box from her purse, opening it to reveal a simple gold band. "This was my mother's wedding ring. She died when I was 12. Cancer." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Before she died, she made me promise I'd marry for love, not convenience." Noah studied the ring, noting how Kate's fingers trembled as she held the box. "What happened to love?" Kate's laugh was sharp, self-deprecating. "Love is a luxury I can't afford. But choice? That's something I can still fight for." She snapped the box shut with finality. "Monday isn't about pretending to be happy. It's about proving I'm not completely powerless." "And Charles Whitmore?" Noah asked. Kate's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering. "Charles believes women are decorative objects that come with dowries. He's told me explicitly that wives should be seen, not heard." She met Noah's eyes with steel-hard determination. "I'd rather die alone than live silently with him." Noah found himself leaning forward, drawn into her orbit despite every rational instinct, screaming warnings. "What makes you think I can pull this off? I've never been to a society party. I don't know which fork to use or how to make small talk with millionaires." Kate's smile was the first genuine one he'd seen from her. "That's exactly why it'll work. You're real, Noah. Authentic. Everything those people aren't. But what if someone recognizes me? What if they know I'm just the guy who empties their trash cans?" Kate reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist. "Then we'll deal with it together. Partners in crime." The touch was electric, unexpected. Noah pulled his hand back instinctively, but not before noticing how perfectly her fingers fit against his skin. "I have conditions," Noah said finally. Kate straightened, all business again. Name them. First, you tell me everything I need to know about your father, this Charles person, and what I'm walking into. No surprises. Kate nodded. Second, if this goes sideways, you protect Lucy. She doesn't need to know her father made a deal with the devil. Lucy is your daughter. Kate's voice carried a note of something Noah couldn't identify. Longing, maybe. Or regret. She's 8. Lost her mother 3 years ago. She's the only thing in my life that matters. Kate was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. What's she like? The question surprised him. Most people asked about his wife, about the accident, about how he was coping. No one ever asked about Lucy herself. She's brilliant, funny, obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced she's going to be a paleontologist when she grows up. Noah's voice warmed despite himself. She still talks to her mother sometimes, tells her about her day, asks for advice. I don't have the heart to stop her. Kate's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away quickly. She sounds wonderful. She is. Noah studied Kate's face, noting the wistful expression that had settled there. Do you want children? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Kate's smile was sad, knowing. I wanted a lot of things once upon a time, but wanting and having are very different animals. She stood up abruptly, smoothing down her sweater. I should let you get back to your Sunday. Thank you for hearing me out. Kate, wait. Noah stood too, his chair scraping against the floor. I'll do it. I'll be your husband for one day. Relief flooded her features so completely that Noah realized how desperate she'd truly been. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means to me. Just promise me one thing, Noah said. Promise me this isn't going to destroy either of our lives. Kate's pause was a heartbeat too long. I promise we'll both survive Monday night. It wasn't the reassurance he'd asked for, but it was honest. In Noah's experience, honesty was rarer than promises anyway. I'll pick you up at 6. We need to get you a proper suit. She handed him another card, this one with an address. Nordstrom. Ask for Marcus. He's expecting you. Monday arrived with the inevitability of a funeral. Noah had spent Sunday evening reading everything he could find about Morrison Holdings, Richard Morrison, and the Morrison family. The internet painted a picture of old money, older values, and a man who'd built an empire on the foundation of his wife's tragic death. Kate rarely appeared in photos, always standing slightly behind her father, always smiling the same careful, controlled smile. The suit fitting had been surreal. Marcus, a reed-thin man with an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive, had transformed Noah from janitor to gentleman with the efficiency of a military operation. The charcoal grey suit fit like it had been made for him, which Marcus assured him it had been. Miss Morrison has excellent taste, he'd said while adjusting the tie. This suit will serve you well. Now, standing in front of his bathroom mirror, Noah barely recognized himself. The man staring back looked capable, confident, worthy of standing next to Katherine Morrison. The illusion was perfect until he looked down at his hands, still calloused and scarred from years of manual labor. Some things couldn't be disguised. Lucy knocked on his bedroom door, her small voice carrying through the wood. Daddy, Margaret's here, but you look funny. Noah opened the door to find his daughter standing in the hallway, her favorite dinosaur pajamas making her look impossibly young. Funny how? Like you're going somewhere important without me? Noah knelt down to her level, his expensive pants creaking with the movement. I have to go to a work thing tonight, sweetheart. Remember how we talked about Daddy sometimes having to do different jobs? Lucy nodded solemnly, but her eyes were wide with questions she didn't know how to ask. Will you be home when I wake up? I'll be home, Noah promised, pulling her into a hug that felt like both a blessing and a goodbye. The ride to the Morrison estate was a study in contrasts. Kate sat beside him in the back of the town car, transformed once again into the polished socialite he'd first encountered in the elevator. Her blue dress was understated, but obviously expensive. Her makeup flawless, her hair arranged in soft waves that had probably taken hours to achieve. But her hands shook as she applied lipstick, and she'd checked her purse for the third time to make sure the ring was there. "Tell me about your father," Noah said, as they wound through the hills overlooking Portland. Kate stared out the window at the mansions growing larger and more elaborate with each mile. "He's brilliant, ruthless, and completely convinced he knows what's best for everyone around him. He built Morrison Holdings from nothing after my mother died, poured all his grief into making money." "And Charles?" Kate's expression tightened. "Charles Whitmore III, heir to the Whitmore shipping fortune, which isn't what it used to be. His family needs our money. We need their social connections. It's the kind of merger my father understands." She turned to face Noah, her blue eyes intense. "Charles is also the kind of man who thinks a woman's opinion is a charming quirk to be tolerated until the wedding, then corrected." The Morrison estate sprawled across several acres of manicured perfection, all rolling lawns and strategic lighting that made everything look like a magazine spread. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive machines that cost more than Noah made in 5 years. He felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with being somewhere he didn't belong. But Kate's hand found his arm and squeezed gently. "Remember," she murmured as they approached the front door. "We met at the library. You were reading to Lucy. I was at the next table. We struck up a conversation about children's books." Noah nodded, running through their fabricated history one more time. 2 years of careful courtship, a small wedding 6 months ago, a quiet life that suited them both. Simple lies that felt more complex with each repetition. The front door opened before they could knock, revealing a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "Katie!" she exclaimed, pulling Kate into a fierce hug. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." This had to be Rose, the housekeeper Kate had mentioned during their preparation sessions, the woman who'd raised Kate after her mother died, who knew all her secrets except this one. "Rose, I'd like you to meet my husband, Noah." Kate's voice was steady, but Noah caught the slight tremor underneath. Rose studied him with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades protecting the girl she'd helped raise. "So, you're the one who stole our Katie's heart," she said finally, extending a warm hand. "She's been keeping you a secret for too long. Some things are worth waiting for." Noah replied, surprised by how easily the words came. Rose's smile was approving, genuine. "Well said. Now get inside before you catch your death. Mr. Morrison's been asking about you every 5 minutes." She leaned closer to Kate, lowering her voice conspirationally. "Fair warning, honey. Charles arrived an hour ago. He's already had 3 drinks." The main hall of the Morrison house was everything Noah had expected, and nothing he was prepared for. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over clusters of Oregon's most powerful people, all holding wine glasses and conducting conversations that probably decided the fate of entire industries. The women wore jewelry that could fund small countries. The men wore confidence like expensive cologne. Noah felt like an imposter in his borrowed skin. "Katherine!" A booming voice cut through the chatter. Richard Morrison approached them with the measured stride of a man accustomed to commanding attention. He was tall, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. His blue eyes, so similar to Kate's, fixed on Noah with laser intensity. "And this must be the mysterious husband we've heard so little about. Dad, this is Noah Fletcher." Kate's arm slipped through Noah's with practiced ease. "Noah, my father, Richard Morrison." The handshake was a test, firm enough to break fingers if Richard chose to apply pressure. Noah met it with the grip of someone who'd spent his life working with his hands, and something like respect flickered in the older man's eyes. "Fletcher." Richard mused. Real estate, Kate mentioned. It wasn't a question, but Noah nodded anyway. Small projects. Nothing compared to what you've built here. Richard's smile was sharp as a blade. Modesty. I appreciate that in a son-in-law. Tell me, how exactly did you meet my daughter? Before Noah could answer, a hand clapped down on Richard's shoulder. Uncle Richard, sorry I'm late. The man who'd appeared beside them was everything Noah had expected Charles Whitmore to be. Tall, blonde, handsome in the way that spoke of good breeding and better dentists. His suit probably cost more than Noah's car, and he wore it with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Charles? Richard's greeting was warm, affectionate. I was just meeting Kate's husband. Charles's blue eyes shifted to Noah, and the temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop several degrees. Husband? His voice carried just enough surprise to sound insulting. I thought Kate was still available. Well, you thought wrong. Kate's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Charles, meet Noah Fletcher. Noah Charles Whitmore. The two men shook hands, and Noah felt Charles's grip linger just long enough to make a point. Fletcher, Charles repeated thoughtfully. That name sounds familiar. Do we know each other? Noah's blood turned to ice water. Charles was studying his face with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle, and Noah could see the exact moment recognition dawned. You deliver pizza, Charles said slowly, his voice carrying across the nearby conversations. To my club, Franco's Pizza. The words hit the surrounding guests like a bomb. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Noah felt the weight of 50 pairs of eyes, all suddenly focused on the interloper in their midst. Kate's hand tightened on his arm, but her expression remained serene. Actually, she said clearly, Noah manages several small businesses, including a restaurant partnership. It was a masterful spin, technically true if viewed from the right angle. But Charles wasn't finished. No, I'm quite sure. You're the delivery boy who brings pizza to the country club. I remember because you always use the service entrance. His smile was cruel, calculated to inflict maximum damage. How entrepreneurial of you, Katherine. Marrying the help. The silence that followed was deafening. Noah felt the familiar burn of shame creeping up his neck, the same feeling he'd carried since childhood whenever someone reminded him of his place in the world. But before he could speak, before he could apologize or run or do any of the things his instincts demanded, Kate stepped forward. Charles, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. I've always admired men who work for a living, who build things with their own hands instead of inheriting them. Her smile was razor-sharp. Perhaps that's why I married Noah, instead of settling for someone who thinks proximity to money makes them important. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through the assembled guests like wind through wheat. Richard Morrison watched his daughter with an expression Noah couldn't read. Charles's face had gone red above his expensive collar. Katherine, I think you're confused about... I'm not confused about anything. Kate's voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with. She turned to Noah, her eyes warm and determined. Shall we get some air? I think the atmosphere in here has become rather stifling. They walked through the French doors onto a terrace overlooking the city lights. The cool evening air was a relief after the oppressive attention inside. Kate's shoulders sagged as soon as they were alone, the perfect posture she'd maintained all evening finally cracking. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have anticipated Charles would recognize you. Should have anticipated? Noah turned to face her. Kate, did you know he'd seen me before? Her silence was answer enough. You knew. You knew Charles would try to humiliate me, and you brought me here anyway. Kate's laugh was bitter. I knew Charles would try to humiliate someone. That's what he does. I just thought—" She trailed off, staring out at the twinkling lights below. "You thought what?" Noah's voice was dangerously quiet. Kate met his eyes, and he saw something there he hadn't expected. Guilt, yes, but also something that looked almost like affection. "I thought you were strong enough to handle it, and I was right." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the way her lipstick had worn off on one side. "The way you stood there, didn't apologize, didn't run. Charles has never encountered anyone like you, because Charles has never encountered anyone poor enough to need his approval." The words came out harsher than Noah intended, but Kate didn't flinch. "Is that what you think this is about? Money?" She shook her head, blonde hair catching the light from the house. "This is about choice, Noah. The choice to be with someone who sees me as a person instead of a prize to be won." Before Noah could respond, the terrace doors burst open. Richard Morrison stepped outside, followed closely by Charles and several other guests who'd apparently decided the evening's entertainment was too good to miss. "Katherine," Richard's voice was deadly calm, "I think it's time we had a family discussion." "Of course, Dad." Kate straightened her shoulders, transforming back into the perfect daughter. "But Noah stays. He's family now, too." Richard's eyes flicked between his daughter and Noah, calculating something behind his measured expression. "Very well. Charles has raised some interesting questions about your husband's background." Charles stepped forward, emboldened by Richard's presence. "Uncle Richard, I've done some checking. This man works for Morrison Holdings, as a janitor." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "He cleans the building your daughter supposedly met him in. She hired him to play this role." "Is that true?" Richard's question was directed at Noah, not Kate. Noah felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his next words would determine not just his own fate, but Kate's as well. He could lie, maintain the fiction they'd constructed, let Kate's plan play out to whatever conclusion she'd intended. Or he could tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. "Yes," Noah said simply. "It's true." Kate's sharp intake of breath was audible, but Noah didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Richard Morrison, meeting the older man's gaze directly. "Your daughter approached me 3 days ago with a business proposition, $50,000 to pretend to be her husband for one evening." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled guests. Charles's smile was triumphant, vindictive. Kate looked like she'd been slapped. But Richard Morrison's expression was unreadable, his poker face carved from granite. "And you accepted this proposition?" "I did." Noah's voice was steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "I have a daughter, 8 years old. The money would change our lives. So this is all fake," Charles said, his voice carrying clearly across the terrace. "Katherine paid this man to humiliate our family, to make a mockery of everything we—" "Enough!" Richard's single word cut through Charles's tirade like a blade. The older man stepped closer to Noah, studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "Tell me, Mr. Fletcher, what do you think of my daughter?" The question was unexpected, designed to catch Noah off guard. He glanced at Kate, seeing the fear in her eyes, the desperate hope that he wouldn't destroy her completely. "I think she's the strongest person I've ever met," Noah said honestly. "I think she's trapped in a life that doesn't fit her, and I think she's brave enough to do something about it. Even if it means lying to her own father." Richard's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. Noah shook his head. "She wasn't lying about the important things. She was lying about Charles because she's terrified of him. She was lying about being married because she's afraid you don't trust her to make her own choices." "And what would you know about my daughter's fears?" Charles interjected, but Richard silenced him with a look. "I know what it's like to be trapped," Noah continued, his voice gaining strength. "I know what it's like to feel like your life belongs to everyone except you. And I know that Kate deserves better than to be traded like a business asset." Richard was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the distant hum of traffic from the city below. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Charles, perhaps you should rejoin the party. I'd like to speak with my daughter and her companion privately." Charles's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on purple. "Uncle Richard, surely you're not taking this charade seriously." Richard's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm taking my daughter's happiness seriously, something I perhaps should have done sooner." After Charles and the other guests had reluctantly filed back inside, Richard turned to face Kate and Noah. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something that looked almost like respect. "Katherine, in 32 years, this is the first time you've ever stood up to me." Kate's chin lifted defiantly. "It won't be the last." "Good." Richard's response surprised them both. "Your mother always said you had her spirit buried somewhere under all that good behavior. I was beginning to wonder if we'd smothered it completely." He turned to Noah, extending his hand again. "Mr. Fletcher, thank you for giving my daughter her voice back." Noah shook the offered hand, confused by the turn the conversation had taken. "Sir?" Richard's smile was genuine this time, warm with an affection Noah hadn't expected. Kate's mother was a lot like her. Strong-willed, independent, completely unsuited to the life I tried to build around her. I spent 13 years trying to change Helena, trying to make her fit the mold of what I thought a Morrison wife should be. "Dad?" Kate's voice was soft, uncertain. Richard looked at his daughter with eyes full of regret. "She died hating me, Katie. Died feeling like a prisoner in her own life because I was too proud to admit I might be wrong." He paused, swallowing hard. "I swore I wouldn't make the same mistake with you, and then I spent 20 years doing exactly that." "So what happens now?" Noah asked. Richard considered the question, his businessman's mind already working through the implications. "Now we go back inside, and you two continue your charade for the rest of the evening. Let Charles and his cronies think they've won something." Kate looked confused. "I don't understand." "Tomorrow, I'm cancelling the Whitmore contract," Richard said simply. "Charles's family has been living off their reputation for 3 generations while their actual assets crumbled. Morrison Holdings doesn't need that kind of partnership." He looked directly at Kate. "And you don't need that kind of husband." "And Noah?" Kate's voice was barely above a whisper. Richard studied Noah for a long moment. "Mr. Fletcher, how would you feel about a career change? Morrison Holdings is always looking for honest people to manage our smaller properties. The pay is considerably better than janitorial work." Noah felt the world tilting beneath his feet. "Sir, I don't have any experience." "You have something more valuable than experience," Richard interrupted. "You have integrity. And apparently you have my daughter's respect, which is not something she gives lightly." Kate was staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. "Dad, are you saying—" "I'm saying I want you to be happy, Katherine. Whether that's with Mr. Fletcher or on your own terms, that's your choice to make." Richard's voice was gentle, paternal in a way Noah had never heard from him. "But I'd like the chance to get to know the man who reminded my daughter she had options." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening's revelations settling around them like snow. Finally, Noah spoke. "What about the $50,000? Kate reached into her purse, pulling out the envelope she'd carried since Friday night. "Consider it a wedding gift," she said, holding it out to him. "For services rendered." Noah stared at the money, then at Kate's face, seeing something there he hadn't noticed before. Behind the careful makeup and perfect hair, behind the practiced smile and polished exterior, was a woman who'd spent 32 years being someone else's idea of perfect. "Keep it," he said finally. Kate's eyes widened. "Noah, I need to know that if we see each other again, it's not because you paid me to be there." Noah's words hung in the cool evening air between them. "I need to know that if we have dinner next week, it's because we both want to, not because of some business arrangement." Kate's smile was radiant, genuine for perhaps the first time all evening. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Fletcher?" "I'm asking if you'd like to meet my daughter," Noah replied. "Lucy would love to hear about your work with wildlife conservation. She's very interested in protecting endangered species." "Even dinosaurs?" Kate's laugh was light, musical. "Especially dinosaurs." Noah found himself smiling back, feeling something shift in his chest, something that had been locked away since Sarah died. "Fair warning, though, she's very particular about her paleontology facts, and she asks a lot of questions." "I like questions," Kate said softly. "I've been waiting 32 years for someone to ask me what I actually want." Richard cleared his throat delicately. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside. Your guests are probably wondering what's become of their host." They walked back into the house together, and Noah noticed immediately that the atmosphere had changed. Where before there had been curiosity and barely concealed judgment, now there was something else. Respect, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. Charles was nowhere to be seen, which Richard explained with a satisfied smile. Young Whitmore decided he had pressing business elsewhere, something about an early morning meeting. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Noah found himself talking with city councilmen about urban development, with business owners about the challenges of small enterprise, with people who treated him like an equal instead of an oddity. Kate stayed close, her hand occasionally finding his arm or shoulder, a gesture that felt increasingly natural as the night wore on. By the time they said their goodbyes and climbed back into the town car, Noah felt like he'd lived through several lifetimes in one evening. Kate had changed back into the jeans and sweater she'd worn to coffee that morning, looking more like herself again. "Thank you," she said as they pulled out of the circular driveway. "For telling the truth, for not running when Charles tried to humiliate you." "Thank you for defending me," Noah replied. "For making it clear that you weren't ashamed to be seen with the help." Kate turned to face him fully, her blue eyes serious in the dim light of the car. "I was never ashamed of you, Noah. If anything, I was ashamed of myself. For lying, for manipulating the situation, for putting you in that position. But you got what you wanted," Noah pointed out. "Your father cancelled the Whitmore contract. You're free." Kate's smile was soft, contemplative. Freedom's only worth something if you have someone to share it with. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "Would you like to have coffee again tomorrow? Just coffee. No envelopes full of money or elaborate deceptions." "I'd like that," Noah said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "But I should warn you, I come with complications. An 8-year-old daughter who's smarter than both of us combined, a neighbor who thinks she's my mother-in-law, and a schedule that includes pizza delivery on weekends." "I like complications," Kate replied. "Simple has never really worked for me." The car pulled up outside Noah's apartment building, modest and worn compared to the Morrison estate, but home in a way no mansion could ever be. "Good night, Noah Fletcher," Kate said softly. "Sweet dreams." "Good night, Katherine Morrison," Noah replied, then paused. "Or is it Kate Fletcher now?" Kate's laugh followed him out of the car and up the stairs to his apartment, where Margaret was waiting with a knowing smile and a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. 6 months later, Noah stood in the same coffee bean where this had all started, watching Kate explain the difference between a triceratops and a styracosaurus to an absolutely fascinated Lucy. His daughter had taken to Kate immediately, drawn by her genuine interest and complete lack of condescension. Kate had proven to be a patient teacher, an enthusiastic student of dinosaur facts, and most surprisingly, a natural at the kind of imaginative play that made Lucy giggle until she couldn't breathe. "Daddy?" Lucy said, looking up from her picture book. "When are you going to marry Kate for real?" The question came out of nowhere, delivered with the casual directness that only 8-year-olds could manage. Noah nearly choked on his coffee, but Kate just smiled and ruffled Lucy's hair. "That's something your daddy and I would need to talk about," she said diplomatically. "Well, you should talk about it soon," Lucy declared, with the authority of someone who'd given the matter serious consideration. "Because Margaret says Kate makes you smile the way Mommy used to, and that's how you know someone's family." Out of the mouths of babes. Noah met Kate's eyes across the small table, seeing his own wonder reflected there. Somehow, in trying to help her escape one life, they'd stumbled into another one entirely. "Lucy," Noah said carefully, "how would you feel if Kate became part of our family? Really, part of it?" Lucy's grin was answer enough, but she provided verbal confirmation anyway. "Does that mean we can get a bigger apartment? One with a garden where we can plant flowers for Mommy?" Kate's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I think we can arrange that," she said softly. "I happen to know someone in real estate." Noah reached across the table, taking Kate's hand in his. The ring finger of her left hand was bare, except for her mother's simple gold band, waiting for something that matched. Something real. "Katherine Morrison," Noah said formally, "would you like to marry me for more than one day?" Kate's answer was lost in Lucy's excited shriek, and the spontaneous applause from the other coffee shop patrons. But Noah didn't need to hear the words. He could see everything he needed to know in her eyes, in the way she held his hand like she was never planning to let go. 1 year later, Richard Morrison walked his daughter down the aisle of a small church in Cedar Falls, Oregon. Lucy Fletcher served as flower girl, scattering rose petals with scientific precision while reciting facts about pollination that made the wedding guests smile. Margaret sat in the front row, crying happy tears and declaring to anyone who would listen that she'd known this would happen from the very beginning. But that was still in the future. Today, in a coffee shop where everything had started with a desperate proposal and $50,000, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds shared chocolate chip cookies and planned their next adventure. Outside, Oregon rain painted the windows in rivulets of silver, but the light was warm and golden and full of promise. Sometimes the biggest risk really was not taking one at all.